Yet another hurricane, Dorian, has just ravaged the Bahamas. Tropical storm Imelda brought more rain to Texas and Louisiana than Hurricane Harvey did. These storms will continue to be more ferocious, more damaging, and more frequent. What we're seeing now is only the beginning. Trump is still ignoring evidence of climate change. You can have your own opinions, but you can't make up your own scientific facts. That's right. Sea level rise projections for New Hampshire were just revised, but climate scientists tell me now that because the Greenland ice sheets are melting so quickly, they'll have to be revised again. The IPCC report says we'll have 11 years from now to address climate change to try to reverse what's happening right now. By the time the next president is inaugurated, it will be 9 years. Very little time. We need someone who will ban fracking everywhere, not just public lands, everywhere. We have to remove the subsidies on the fossil fuel industry and increase the penalties on people who pollute our air and land. Raise the taxes on fossil fuel income and wealth, cut back on military spending on oil, and take that money and put it into research to innovate sustainable and renewable energy sources. We have to create jobs so there's no friction between environmental people and the labor movement. We must develop fully renewable energy as soon as we possibly can by 2050, if not before. No more fracking, no more nuclear power. They don't take into account the full cost and damage to public health and the environment. Fracking chemicals poison our drinking water and create earthquakes. And methane emissions caused by fracking are more powerful and more damaging than even CO2 in our atmosphere. Nuclear power is dangerous and irresponsible. It creates waste that we have no solution for. Right now at Seabrook Nuclear Power Plant, spent nuclear fuel rods are being stored in the parking lot because we don't know where to put them. From now on, we all have to be active participants in our democracy. We cannot allow another 2016 to happen. This country cannot afford another 4 years of Donald Trump and Republican-controlled Senate. Absolutely. Everyone has to knock on doors, make phone calls, talk to your friends, talk to your family, make sure everyone votes in 2020. This is an existential threat to our planet. Everything we do must be viewed through that lens. Every policy created must consider climate change. We must protect our drinking water. We need a president who will stand up to the fossil fuel industry and say no more business as usual. We cannot compromise. We cannot compromise on climate change. We need a bold leader who will act on global warming on day one in office. Bernie Sanders gets this. He has the boldest and most comprehensive plan to address climate change. He's the reason we're all talking about Medicare for All now. Help me welcome our next president, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you all for being out today, and let me thank the Jeff Bean Band for their music. Let me thank Nicole Surratt for her remarks, and let me thank Mindy Mesner for all the great work she's doing on the environment and for her support. Mindy, thanks so much. All right, let me begin by getting you all very nervous. All right? You ready to be made nervous? And here is the truth. Wish I could tell you something else. The future of this country, and given the crisis we face in climate change, whether or not we retain democracy in America, whether or not the planet resolves the crisis of climate change, your generation will make the difference. Now, that's a very awesome responsibility I'm giving you, but it's the truth. And the truth is, thank God, that your generation is the most progressive young generation in the history of this country. And you should be proud of that. You are a generation that is anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobia, anti-religious bigotry, anti-xenophobic. And that is the very good news. Well, let me give you the bad news. Your generation does not vote at the level it should be voting. And if your generation, now the good news is that in 2018 we saw young people participating in the election in much higher numbers than in the previous midterm elections. If your generation voted at the same level as older people did in America, we could transform this country in a very fundamental way. So what I'm here to ask of you is that at a time when we are living in an unprecedented moment in American history, and that's the truth, not your fault, not my fault, that's the way it is. This is an unprecedented moment, and we have got to act in an unprecedented way. And what that means, yes, you've got to vote. Yes, you've got to be involved in the political process, and I'll be talking in a moment about some of the issues I think we face. But you have got to go out to your friends, the guys in the dorm, the women in the dorm, and make them understand that they cannot sit it out. Now, I understand. I know that many of your friends think that politics is bullshit, right? All right. But you got to tell them that if they are worried about their student debt, if they are worried about working for $9 or $10 an hour, not making enough money, if they're worried about racism or sexism, if they're worried about climate change, that you tell them to stop moaning and groaning and have the guts to stand up and fight for justice in America. And let me tell you something else. The people who own this country, the big money interests, they want your friends not to vote. And they want your friends to think politics is stupid and irrelevant. You know why? Because they want to buy elections. And the only way they win elections is when they spend huge amounts of money and they suppress the vote. All right? And they want to convince people, oh, politics is so stupid. Why do you want to waste your time? They may not say it that way, but that is the implication. And meanwhile, they will spend hundreds of millions of dollars to elect candidates who represent the rich and the powerful. Well, if they are prepared to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on politics, you tell your friends that maybe they should get their ass to the polling booth and get involved in politics. Now, let me tell you something else that's going on, and it doesn't give me any pleasure to tell you this, but this is the truth. The political system that we are living under right now is a corrupt system. What democracy is about, which I believe in and you believe in, is one person, one vote. We all got the same amount of power. You got to vote, and you got to vote, and I got to vote. But what you got now as a result of Citizens United and other decisions is you got billionaires buying elections. That's not democracy, that is oligarchy. And then what you got is Republicans, including the governor of this state. He understands how powerful young people are. And you know how I know he understands it? Because he's trying to suppress the vote for young people. But it's not just the governor of New Hampshire. All over the country, you got Republican cowardly governors who can't win elections on the issues. They're making it harder for poor people, people of color, Native Americans, to participate in the political process. And we got to stand up to all of those people. We got to not be intimidated, and we got to get out and vote in record-breaking numbers. But it's not only the political system that is corrupt. Alongside of that, and totally dependent upon that, interrelated to it, is an economy which is rigged, an economy which works phenomenally well for the 1%, but not so good for the working people of this country. So what you got now, and you don't see this on television because of the folks who own the media, what you got now is the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth, and it's worse now than at any time since the 1920s. What you got now is 3 people in America, 1, 2, 3, owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society. You got the top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 92%. And while here in New Hampshire and in Vermont and all over this country, you got people working 2 or 3 jobs. Talked to a woman in Iowa a couple of weeks ago, a mother of 3 working in McDonald's, trying to feed her family on $10 an hour, and she can't do it. And that's true all over this country. People working for starvation wages. 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%. So what we are talking about, and what my administration is about, will be about, is to say to the 1%, they cannot have it all. We're going to create an economy that works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. Four years ago, I came to this campus, and I said, we got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. And 4 years ago, people said, that's too extreme, that's too crazy. Minimum wage in Washington, federal minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. You can't raise it to $15 an hour. But because people stood up and fought, groups like Fight for 15, you know who they are? All right, these are fast food workers who had the guts to go out on strike and tell the world they can't make it on $7.25 or $8 or $10 an hour. Then at the very least, we need a $15 an hour minimum wage. You know what's happened over the last 4 years? That idea that seems so crazy and radical has now been adopted by 7 states in America and the U.S. House of Representatives. And as president, we're going to have a $15 an hour minimum wage in every state in this country. We're going to have equal pay for equal work. And we're going to make it easier for workers to join unions so they can get decent wages and benefits. 4 years ago, and this is, I want to remind you of something that Nelson Mandela, you all know who Nelson Mandela was. Nelson Mandela said something that was very profound. He said, it always seems impossible until it is done. It always seems impossible until it is done. In other words, what the system tells you in every time you turn on the TV, all over the world, the system tells you is think small, not big. You can't accomplish anything. You have no power. You don't even have to vote. It's all crap. You can't do anything. That's what the system tells you. But what Mandela said in so many words is if you think big and you're prepared to struggle and fight, there is no limit to what you can accomplish. And that is the history of America. Real change never takes place from the top on down, always from the bottom on up. That's the history of the labor movement, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the gay movement, the environmental movement. When millions of people stand up for justice, they cannot be denied. And that is what this campaign is about. It's a campaign of justice, of economic justice, social justice, racial justice, and environmental justice. 4 years ago, I came here to this campus, and I said, you know, it doesn't make sense to me that when we talk about higher education in America, you got millions of people going deeply into debt for doing what? For trying to get a good education. That in this day and age, with an exploding technology and great global competitiveness, we need to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Four years ago, that was considered to be a radical idea. But you know what? Young people and others all over this country said, you know what? Hey, establishment, we don't want to leave school $50,000 or $100,000 in debt. And what began to happen from coast to coast, state after state, moved in the direction of making public colleges and universities tuition free. Major universities are now making medical school tuition free. Just a couple of weeks ago, in New Mexico, they are moving forward so that any resident of Mexico, New Mexico, can go to a public college or university tuition free. And that's one of a dozen states. All right? So here is the issue. If you believe that education is a human right, if you believe that you should not have to leave school and pay off a student debt for decades in some cases, you got to stand up and fight for it. And in addition to making public colleges and universities tuition free, we're going to cancel all student debt in this country. How many of you have or will have student debt? Raise your hand. All right. That's not right. And here's the point that I want to make, and where I want you to think big and not small. You're saying, well, you know, Bernie's a nice guy. He wants this free, that free, blah, blah, blah. All right. But understand that for the wealthy and the powerful, that's exactly what they get. And maybe, just maybe, we may want a government that works for working families and the middle class. Now, some of you may have read or remember that 11 years ago, the United States Congress, against my vote, bailed out the crooks on Wall Street who destroyed our economy. Gave them trillions of dollars of zero-interest loans, plus $700 billion for the largest bailout in American history. 2 years ago, Donald Trump and his friends gave over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large profitable corporations. So what you have got to ask yourself, if the Congress can give tax breaks to billionaires such that Amazon, anybody here knows how much Amazon paid in taxes last year? Zero, after making $10 billion in profit, owned by the wealthiest guy in the country. So if you can give tax breaks to billionaires, if you could bail out Wall Street, why does anybody think we cannot cancel student debt in this country by having a modest tax on Wall Street speculation? And that is what we will do. 4 years ago, I came here to New Hampshire and I said health care is a human right, not a privilege. 4 years ago, the political establishment and the media establishment, oh, Bernie, that's a radical idea. It's un-American. Oh, my God. Healthcare is a human right. We are proud to be the only nation major country on earth that doesn't guarantee healthcare to all people, aren't we wonderful? Okay? 4 years ago, that idea, when I introduced that bill in the Senate, I had one sponsor, me. Well, the world has changed. Last time I looked, I think we had 15 co-sponsors in the Senate, and more importantly, a majority of the American people who understand that health care is a human right and that we've got to move to Medicare for all. Now, there's another issue, and this is an issue where you guys are going to have to work very, very hard on, because this is an issue that the future of our country and the future of the planet depend upon. And that is the threat in this country and around the world of climate change. Now, it is pathetic that we have a president who thinks that climate change is a hoax. I myself think that Donald Trump is a hoax. So my pledge to you, which is not a very radical pledge, is that I will listen to the scientists and not the fossil fuel industry as we deal with climate change. So I think you all know, all of you are a lot smarter than Donald Trump. Again, a very low bar. I hope you're a lot smarter than Donald Trump. And that is, you understand that not only is climate change real, not only is it caused by human activity and the carbon emissions, but it is already causing devastating problems in our country and all over the world. You all saw what happened in the Bahamas last month. Incredible devastation. Puerto Rico a couple of years ago. The incredible, unprecedented flooding we saw in Texas recently. Right now, major forest fires in Bolivia. During the summer, heat waves, unprecedented heat waves in Europe. Drought in Australia, India, Pakistan, facing terrible problems with heat. So we got a real crisis on our hands. Now, we got an idiot in the White House who thinks that climate change is a hoax. And that is dangerous not only for this country, but for the entire world. And then you got other folks who say, well, yeah, climate change is real, the science is right, but we can't spend too much money, we can't deal with it too fundamentally because it's an expensive proposition, so we got to be modest about it. Well, my view is that if you listen to the scientists, you got to do what the scientists tell us we have to do. And what they are telling us is that if we are going to save this planet so that your kids and your grandchildren will have a healthy and habitable country in which to live, we have got to have the courage to take on the greed of the fossil fuel industry, and as soon as humanly possible, transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And I am very proud to tell you that I have introduced several weeks ago the most aggressive and comprehensive climate change legislation ever introduced by any presidential candidate, and I expect any federal candidate ever done. All right? And what this plan does is moves as aggressively as possible to cut back on carbon emissions, to retrofit millions of buildings which are now wasting energy, to electrify our transportation system, to invest very significantly in solar energy, in wind energy, geothermal, and other sustainable energies, to provide the protection that poor people and the most vulnerable people in this country need from the ravages of climate change. That's what our legislation does. And consistent with the Green New Deal, what it does is create up to 20 million good-paying jobs. But in order to accomplish that goal, we're going to have to take on the greed of the fossil fuel industry. And that is exactly what I intend to do as President of the United States. And let me touch on just a few other issues. I hope all of you study criminal justice and understand that the criminal justice system we have today is a broken and racist system. We have over 2 million people in jail right now, this moment. That is more people in jail than any other country on earth, including communist China, which is 4 times our size and is an authoritarian society. So we are going to work together to transform our criminal justice system. We're going to invest in jobs and education for young people, not more jails and more incarceration. We are going to end the so-called war on drugs and legalize marijuana. Tell you an interesting story. A while back, I was in Nevada, where marijuana is legal. And you drive down the roads there, and you see these huge billboards which says, go to X shop to buy marijuana. So here you have these large corporations making a lot of money selling marijuana, at the same time as you have people in jail today for doing exactly what these corporations are doing. And that is why we're going to move forward to expunge the records of those people arrested for possession of marijuana. Let me ask you all a question. I've always been amazed by the answer that I get. How many people here know of anybody, maybe yourself, who are arrested for possession of marijuana? Raise your hands. Wow. This is what the war on drugs has done. Okay? Now, we're also, and some of you may not know this, here's a question. There are 400,000 people at this moment who are behind bars without having been convicted of any crime. Why are they behind bars? Why are they behind bars if they weren't convicted of a crime? What? No? What is the answer? Bail. All right? You have a system in which you are arrested, maybe you're guilty, maybe you're innocent, but you haven't been tried yet. And yet you end up in jail and you can't get out awaiting your trial because you don't have $500 or $1,000 for bail. 400,000 people are in jail right now for the crime of being poor. If you are wealthy and you get arrested, you post bail and you get out. And that is why we are going to end cash bail in this country. It is why we are going to end private prisons and detention centers in this country. Because corporations should not be making money by imprisoning fellow Americans. We have a president of the United States who thinks he's going to gain votes by demonizing the undocumented people in this country. That's what demagogues always do. They try to divide the American people of any country, up. That's the history of demagoguery in the world. We have a very different view of how we deal with immigration, and that is, instead of demonizing the undocumented, we're going to move toward comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. We are going, on my first day in office, to issue an executive order which will provide legal status to the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program. And we are going to develop a humane border policy. The United States must never be about tearing babies from the arms of their mothers, about putting little kids into cages, separating families. we will develop a humane and rational asylum process at the border. Right now, in the Congress, I hear many of my colleagues getting to the floor of the Senate and the House, and they say, we as conservatives, we believe in small government. We believe that we should get the government off the backs of the people. Let the people do what they want, except when it comes to the right of a woman to control her own body. So I happen to believe that a woman's right to control her body is a privacy issue. I believe it is protected by the Constitution of the United States. And my promise to you this evening is that I will never nominate anybody to the U.S. Supreme Court who is not 100% pro-choice. And who respects and will defend Roe v. Wade. All of us react in horror and disgust when we turn on the TV and we see another horrific mass shooting. In fact, in a few days, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to be in Las Vegas to kind of commemorate that terrible, terrible mass shooting that took place a number of years ago, where I can't remember, I think dozens and dozens of people were killed and hundreds were wounded by some guy who took his assault weapon through a hotel window and started spraying people. Now, the good news is that the American people increasingly are of a common mind regarding the need for strong gun safety legislation. And whether you come from a rural state like Vermont or New Hampshire, you come from a urban city like New York or Los Angeles, people understand that we must do everything possible to end the horror of the mass shootings and the gun deaths that we see in this country. All right, and that's the good news. And what people appreciate, there's a lot of issues that I won't take them all off, but everybody understands we need to expand background checks. People who have a history of violence should not be owning guns. I think 90% of the American people believe in that. We got to end the so-called gun show loophole. We got to end the straw man provision, which allows people to legally buy guns and then sell them to criminals. And here's something that's very interesting. And I think what happened in El Paso and what happened in Dayton kind of turned people in this direction. For many decades, I have believed that we should end the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. And from what I can see, there are now a pretty good majority of the American people who believe that as well. So the question that you might want to ask is, how does it happen if the American people, gun owners, non-gun owners, urban, rural, want to move toward gun safety legislation? Why is it that we don't have it? And the answer is, that's right. The answer is exactly that. The answer is that you have an organization called the NRA, which has intimidated the Republican leadership and the President of the United States. And in fact, what the NRA has basically said to anybody who runs for office who's a Republican, we will oppose you if you're in favor of gun safety legislation. So you're looking at somebody who I think is D- voting record from the NRA. As president, I suspect it will become an F. But I will not be intimidated by the NRA, and we will pass gun safety legislation. The main point that I want to make to you this evening, and I am the only candidate, I believe, who's running for president who will make this point, is that no president, not the best intentioned in the world, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can bring about the changes we need in this country by himself or herself. And you know why? This is what you don't see on television. The fact of the matter is that in Wall Street, in the insurance companies, in the drug companies, in the fossil fuel industry, in the military industrial complex, in the prison industrial complex, in the 1%, You have people with unlimited amounts of wealth and power. And the only way we take them on and do what the American people want, what working families need, is to educate, organize, and to develop an unprecedented grassroots movement. So what this campaign is about, and obviously I am here this evening to ask for your help to help me win here in New Hampshire. I am asking for your help to win the Democratic nomination. I am asking your help to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. But I'm asking something more of you. I am asking you to work with me to help transform this country, to create an economy and a government that works for all of us and not just the 1%.